have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And in the news this week, you remember how we told you how the Indian Supreme Court had reinstated the sodomy laws? Well, this past week, they made a sweeping ruling on behalf of transgender rights.
Which may be very helpful going back to the criminalization of sodomy. Meanwhile, back in the United States, Ohio ordered recognition of an Ohio judge ordered recognition of same-sex couples married in other states.
On the other hand, Louisiana's legislature has voted to retain its unconstitutional anti-sodomy laws.
And a Christian school in New York City stops a girl from taking her transgender boyfriend to the prom.
San Francisco Pride has redeemed itself and apologizes and is going to make Chelsea Manning an honorary Grand Marshal for this year's Pride Parade.
Whoopee. Brunei has adopted a death by stoning law for sodomy and other offenses.
Happy Easter from the Vatican. They were busy this week at a UN conference blocking rights for women and gays.
But Malta has adopted a civil unions law, including adoption rights for same-sex couples.
Norway is honoring the work of homoerotic artist Tom of Finland with postage stamps.
And you thought the Harvey Milk stamp was a big deal. Wait do you see this? Let's get real, Andy says. He's going to review and recommend a couple of shows. Will Eno's The Realistic Joneses with an all-star cast, and Dan Hoyle's The Real Americans. But let's get to the news first.
Yeah, we start out in Ohio, where our favorite federal judge at the moment, Judge Timothy Black, did as promised, because he telegraphed this.
He did.
And he ordered the state to recognize legal same-sex marriages performed out of state. He said that the ban is unconstitutional and unenforceable. The state is appealing, but Black is waiting. Well, did he do his stay? He had his stay hearing.
Here, he said today, actually, as we're taping, because the Fourth Circuit, Sixth Circuit, whatever it is, circuit that this and other states are in, they all have cases that are going up to the appeals level of the federal court. And so just to keep everybody cool, he said, yes, we can stay this decision. We won't let everybody run rampant getting married. But for the four couples who brought this lawsuit in the first place, they're in an emergency situation. It's a lot of lesbians who are about to give birth or have kids, and they want to be able to put both parents on the birth certificate.
Yeah, well.
And not that other couples don't have the same issues. But what's interesting is that the Ohio Attorney General is not fighting this. He is conceding that it's okay to give recognition to these four couples who are already married out of state. He's not going to contest that, and he just wants the stay for future other couples.
How come?
I don't know. They're splitting hairs. But I want to quote from Judge Timothy Black's decision. He said that the state's arguments against recognition of same-sex marriages legally performed elsewhere, because that's what's at stake here, was staggeringly devoid of any legitimate justification for the state's ongoing arbitrary discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. Therefore, Ohio's marriage recognition bans are facially unconstitutional and unenforceable under any circumstances.
Got it?
He is having none of this. And this all started with that one poor male couple, one of whom was dying of ALS, got a little private plane, went to Maryland, got married on the tarmac, came back to Ohio and sued for recognition so that the dying one could have a legitimate death certificate. And that judge looked at that case, decided for the dying man, and everything has snowballed since then in Ohio.
Right.
with this same judge.
A slightly different story in Utah, but positive, where the 10th Circuit heard the appeal on the same-sex marriage decision, saying that Utah's amendment against same-sex marriage was unconstitutional. The court, by most observers, seems split, like 2-1 in this case.
Well, they're actually saying 1, 1, and 1. There's one who's sort of unknown, maybe leaning in our direction, but not sure.
But, so we don't know. That's the point. And but in the meantime, in Utah, the state is trying to block adoption petitions of at least 2 of the 1,000 legally married same-sex couples.
Well, the Attorney General, the new Attorney General in Utah, is quite a piece of work. First of all, he submits a brief to this 3-judge federal appeals court panel and says, we put in our arguments that this all had to do with parenting, but we relied on this Regnerus study, and we're rescinding that because we've realized that his study is just full of crap, is what it is. Worthless, not worth the paper it's written on. His own university has disavowed it. So we're taking all that back. But meanwhile, we're going to try to, make these second-parent adoptions not legal. And meanwhile, when they're in court for this hearing, he goes over to the same-sex couples who are there, who brought this lawsuit in the first place, gets down on his knees to talk to them because they're sitting on the benches in the courtroom.
He should have spit in his eye.
And says, I'm so happy to meet you, and of course this is nothing personal,
oh, yeah?
and I wish you all the best, and I want to say,
yeah.
How dare these guys?
It's outrageous.
It's like the guys that we've debated in TV studios who then want to shake our hands afterwards.
And I'm saying, why would I want to shake your hand? You
Exactly.
just said I shouldn't have any rights.
Exactly.
So go your way and repent.
I didn't shake the hand of the guy who tried to do that to me either.
This was Niger Innes, as I remember.
Well, mine was a guy who was representing the archdiocese.
Oh, Jack Hale.
No, it was a different
guy?
different guy.
Anyway.
But he was the one who said, it's all about anal intercourse.
Right.
And I looked at him and on live TV said, oh, please, everyone enjoys anal intercourse. He had no response.
Okay.
All right. In Indiana, a federal court has ordered the state to recognize a lesbian couple who were married in Massachusetts, again, because one is dying.
Terminally ill. She's got all kinds of cancer. This is a Lambda case on behalf of Amy Sandler and Nikki Kwasny and their kids. Kwasny is the one with terminal cancer.
We are making as clear and evident and concrete as possible the real-life implications of these issues, and we're winning on that.
To the point that even the Nevada Republican Party has removed from its platform its opposition to same-sex marriage. They want a big tent. What they really would like to do is win an election.
Yes. Also, the Young Conservatives for Freedom, which is a national group that's just a sort of ancillary group of the Freedom to Marry organization. Young Conservatives for Freedom to Marry is actually who they are. And they've launched a $1 million campaign to change the national GOP platform in 2016.
Where are they getting the money? Paul Singer?
Paul Singer, I'm sure, or others.
We don't know.
No, we don't.
But those are the ones with the big bucks.
In Michigan, the ACLU has filed a new lawsuit to have the state recognize marriages performed after the court declared it legal. There's a stay there.
Well, there were 300 such marriages.
Yes, and Michigan, like Utah, has said, yes, those marriages are legal, but we're not recognizing them because what the stay does is it takes us back to the original law, which is nonsense.
Well, so Michigan won't recognize them, but Attorney General Eric Holder has already said that the federal government will recognize them.
Exactly. Now, here's actually a footnote on Ohio I'm not quite clear on. LGBT activists in Ohio are pressing forward on putting a question on the ballot in November for marriage rights, which I think is still a little, even though the polls show us ahead all over the place, it still seems to me a little risky to be putting this on the ballot. And we don't like voting on our fundamental rights.
We don't.
But they're pushing ahead.
Now, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force has a new campaign called Queer Our Taxes. We have a website for that. It's queerourtaxes.org. They want the IRS to accept joint returns. A little late for this. They just put this out on tax day. They want the IRS to accept joint returns from same-sex couples who are unmarried and let same-sex couples claim their kids through a new dependent for tax purposes category, even if it is in a state that denies them the right to adoption.
And would this also apply to heterosexual couples? And why would the...
and why would you call it queer then?
And why would the IRS do that if they don't do it for heterosexual couples?
Right. Well, I think that their argument here is there are a lot of places where we have no right, no recognition, and this is where we need recognition.
Right.
And the federal government, just as I just said, Eric Holder is giving recognition to the Michigan marriages.
Yes.
The federal government could be recognizing this until people can get married in these places, or until the government starts recognizing domestic partnerships.
Well, I do think it's a nice assault on the idea that you have to be married to get any kind of recognition or benefits. But I think we're going to get farther with legalizing marriage. And in fact, in Columbia, South Carolina, there was a tax day demonstration for same-sex marriage rights because in Columbia, South Carolina, they certainly don't have those
And in
rights.
Illinois, Governor Pat Quinn has ordered the National Guard to recognize same-sex couples wed in the state. Some counties do it there, some counties don't. By June 1st, everybody's going to have to do it there, but it's only about 16 of the 102 counties now issuing licenses. There's no direction from the Attorney General on this. It's up to the clerks whether they want to sort of start doing same-sex marriages.
Also in Illinois, the House there has defeated the proposed no conversion therapy for minors bill. This is a bill that has been having some success in a few states around the country. California, New Jersey, New York, it's moving forward, but it has been beaten back in Illinois under attack from right-wingers who want to be able to have kids go to therapy to change their
And it also
sexual
did not
orientation.
advance in Washington State.
I guess it's more controversial. What shouldn't be controversial is that the Supreme Court 10 years ago in Lawrence v. Texas, 11 years ago now, I guess, outlawed sodomy laws for consenting adults. And Louisiana, a number of states, though, never bothered to take them off their books.
Mississippi only gave women the right to vote a little while ago. I mean, obviously women could vote, but they didn't change the law.
Well, they're trying to take away the right to vote for a lot of people.
Yes.
But these laws remain on the books as, just archaic residual things, except...
Or as good statements of family values, as George Bush would say.
Well, what they
W. Bush.
actually are is very bad things because the cops use them to continue to arrest people.
And they get confused. It's on the books. I arrest you, I charge you with sodomy, and then you can't be tried for it. Meantime, you're in the paper for sodomy.
Exactly. So Louisiana, where there have been these cases ongoing of cops entrapping gay men for sex and then arresting them and publicizing their names, someone's in the legislature decided that was a bad idea.
And got it through committee.
Right, and proposed this as a bill, but the House...
The Christian Louisiana Family Forum got in gear, and the arguments they raised were that teens would be less protected from sexual predators, and it would put public health at risk.
The law is about consenting adults, not about sexual abuse of minors or whatever,
but I guess
which there are a lot of other laws against.
But in Louisiana, I guess you don't want an attack ad against yourself saying you voted for a sodomy.
Exactly right. That's why these laws remain on the books.
So they didn't do it.
Well, it may help to understand that the Louisiana legislature also recently voted to adopt the Bible as the state book.
Is there no separation? There's not even separation of church and state in New York City. I don't know why we should expect anything more of them.
I like the blog comment that suggested that the Louisiana state song should be "Send in the Clowns."
It's a clown college there in Louisiana.
Yeah.
All right. You know that Harlem pastor that put up the marquee
Yes.
that said Jesus would stone homosexuals?
Yes, and so activists showed up and said, we're here
Yes.
for our stoning.
So there's a Holocaust Remembrance Committee in New York, and he's a member. And so, people complained about this and said, why do you, they said, well, we're aware of his position on that. You're right, is not good. But he's very good on Israel. So, but we're talking to him about that other stuff.
Oh, good luck. Good luck. Have you
to-
seen the videotape?
You need to cast him into the outer darkness.
Well, what's the matter? You don't like his free speech rights?
He has a right. He can keep saying this stuff. The government should not interfere with that, and we'll get to that later
Yes,
in
we
Canada.
will. All right. Well, let's start with
We're
a
not going
Christian school in
Yeah.
Queens, New York, Martin Luther High School, which
Named after Martin Luther, the founder of Lutheranism.
yes, not named after Martin Luther King Jr. This
Or
is
Senior.
yes,
Or the third.
yeah, exactly. This is a very Lutheran, conservative, religious high school. And they're in the news now because they have told two of their students that they cannot come to the prom together. One is a girl, the other is a transgender male.
No video.
They have been together for, that was the voice of God telling us that they can't.
That was Martin Luther.
Yeah, saying they haven't gotten the video. But it's a touching story because these two have been together for some years.
2 years.
Yeah.
They were kicked out of their homes by their parents.
When they came out to them.
Yeah.
So
of course, come out about what is the question.
Well, originally they came out as a lesbian couple,
Yes.
and then one member of the couple transitioned or is in the midst of transitioning.
So
and
the girl is sort of saying, hey, I'm dating a boy. What's the problem? But I mean, of course, there shouldn't be a problem no matter who you're dating.
Of course not. But you didn't like it when I was dating a girl, and now you don't like it when I'm dating a boy. And
Well, the school sees them as a same-sex couple.
And describe this as an unconventional situation.
Now, the girl is not like pushing this, but
No,
but
she's saying-
she's mounting a
they're gonna-
independent prom or something.
Yeah, they're going to have their own event.
where anybody can go.
Yeah, so good for them.
Yeah. And she's getting a lot of support from fellow students. Apparently, a lot of support from teachers too, who are too cowardly to speak up for her.
Or to quit.
Yeah.
In South Carolina, at the University of South Carolina upstate in Spartanburg, the school has canceled its production of a play called How to Be a Lesbian in 10 Days or Less.
Ha ha.
So the school said, clearly this is humor and sarcasm, but since this idiot in the legislature is against it, we're going to cancel it rather than lose money from the legislature. The legislator who's against this freaked out when he heard this title. He said, well, clearly this is a play about recruitment, not about being born this way.
Isn't that the old chant of the Lesbian Avengers?
Recruit, recruit, recruit.
10% is not enough. Recruit, recruit, recruit. As I remember from my youth.
Humor.
In Gainesville, Florida, an out lesbian and environmental activist, Helen Warren, was just elected to the city commission. In her first try for office, her campaign signs were covered with anti-gay slurs, but she prevailed in the end in Gainesville. Times they are a-changing.
Well, there was a gay man who was a city council member in Mission Hills, California, in the sort of Palm Springs area, and he was running for re-election. They put fag all over his campaign signs, and he lost. Told him to go back to the gay party.
Well, we almost elected an out lesbian as Attorney General of this state, Karen Burstein, and she was sailing along, and then the borough president of Staten Island said, as a lesbian, she is unfit for public office. And did everybody dissociate themselves from Guy Molinari, the Staten Island borough president? No. Rudy Giuliani kept him as a friend and everything and all that kind of stuff. And Karen Burstein, the lesbian, lost to a real schnook. by the way.
Well, better news maybe from Maine, where the newly out gay representative, U.S. Representative Mike Michaud, is running for governor against a very right-wing incumbent, Paul LePage, who did everything he could to stop marriage, gay rights, everything in Maine. And Michaud is up by a number of points in the polls. There's a third candidate in the race, too, so maybe that's helping Michaud.
And
but
as Maine
fingers crossed.
And as Maine goes, so goes the nation.
Maybe. I'm a little angry again at Representatives Kirsten Sinema from Arizona
What
and
did she do
Sean
now?
P. Maloney.
What did they do
They
now?
voted against the minimum wage raise.
Minimum wage?
Minimum wage.
You know, I mean, honestly, I want there to be a Democratic majority in the House because I think that things go a little bit better when that happens.
Well,
but these two,
speaking of clown college.
Just awful. Minimum wage. I mean, we don't need a minimum wage. We need living wages in this country. That's what we don't have.
We told you about the new Harvey Milk stamp that's going to be issued on May 22nd. Well, the White House announced that they will hold a ceremony there for the issuing of that stamp on May 22nd, which is Harvey's birthday.
In Illinois, Lambda Legal has filed a federal suit for a transgender woman, Nia Taylor, who was denied medical care after she required advanced replacement therapy. They say it's a violation of
hormone replacement.
What did I say?
Advanced replacement therapy.
Advanced hormone replacement. They say it's a violation of the non-discrimination provisions of the Affordable Health Care Act that requires clinics receiving federal funds to treat transgender patients equally. The doctor in this case said, "We don't treat people like you." That's what the doctor said. So the doctor is named in this case.
And she was a long-standing patient of his. She didn't just walk in off the street. She'd been a patient of his for some years.
Outrageous.
Very outrageous. Better news in Lumberton, Texas, where transgender teacher Laura Jane
King. Klug?
Yeah. Has been reinstated as a substitute teacher.
Well, parents had complained about having a trans woman teaching 5th grade, but I think they all realized
they
that
went
this
through a
was
very sensitive and public coming out period about it. She also has a side job as a pilot, so that's why she's only a substitute
In
teacher.
Phoenix, Monica Jones, a trans activist, faces charges of, quote, manifestation of intent to prostitution. It's one of those laws, and believe me, they do it in New York City too, that means you get arrested for walking like trans.
While trans.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So 50 people, supporters, rallied at the courthouse. They're challenging the constitutionality of the statute with the assistance of the ACLU.
She was convicted. She was convicted in spite of all the testimony that she was doing nothing but walking down the street in that neighborhood. She is a student at the Arizona State University School of Social Work, 29 years old,
Outrageous.
and has a lot of national support from trans activists.
But, again,
Convicted.
I have an association with New Alternatives for Homeless LGBT Youth. It happens to the trans kids of color especially all the time on the streets of New York. They can be sitting there reading on a park bench, and they are arrested for loitering for prostitution.
It's just harassment. It is just absolute harassment, control, abuse.
And the police figure this kid, this homeless transgender kid, is going to come into court, and I'm going to say, was soliciting, was waving at cars, whatever the hell it is, was talking to someone. And it's very hard not to defend against.
Better news from San Francisco, where the Pride Committee there, which last year threw a complete fit at the idea that Chelsea Manning, who we would regard, I certainly would, as a hero.
Me too.
Good.
Chelsea's one of my heroes.
Chelsea.
Former Bradley Manning.
Yes, and was convicted of.
Everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah, but revealing state secrets.
But didn't he win a Pulitzer Prize? No,
that was Glenn Greenwald.
That's Glenn Greenwald.
And Edward Snowden.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, Chelsea is in Fort Leavenworth in Kansas doing time for having taken some government materials and released them publicly that were exposing some misdeeds on the part of the U.S. government, heaven forbid. So activists in San Francisco last year nominated her as a honorary Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade there, and then the Pride Parade...
elected
Yes.
her. And this was the selection committee, and they picked Chelsea
as one of several.
Right, and then they made a big deal about, well, we have a rule about you have to be from San Francisco and all this nonsense.
So she didn't make it last year, but the San Francisco Pride Committee, in behavior that I think is not often enough emulated in any government or private agencies, apologized just now and has named Chelsea Manning as an honorary Grand Marshal for this year's Pride Parade.
I imagine there's a new group of people running things.
Perhaps so. I don't know whether that is true or not, but Chelsea, and that's a new sketch of Chelsea that she has approved, her as female in Fort Leavenworth. She has accepted from Fort Leavenworth the honor of being the honorary Grand Marshal. Also, the Chelsea Manning contingent in last year's San Francisco Pride Parade, even though she wasn't allowed to be a Grand Marshal, was the biggest non-corporate contingent in the parade. And there will, of course, be a contingent this year, along with contingents in parades around the country.
Do you think Chelsea could get a leave of absence from the prison to participate just for that, maybe?
I do not believe so.
No?
But she is appealing her sentence and is seeking approval for hormone therapy in Fort Leavenworth.
Nice to see the New York Times do a hard-hitting editorial this week telling President Obama to get with the program and issue an executive order protecting people from discrimination by federal contractors on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And they also say that the executive order does not and should not have an egregious religious exemption like the Employment Non-Discrimination Act.
Well, a couple of notes on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which, frankly, I certainly would like to see disappear if it retains that broader religious exemption. But Apple CEO Tim Cook said publicly this week that the president should, or the Congress should mark the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act by passing ENDA. I think that's a little unfortunate in its analogizing. And 7 Republicans have now signed on as co-sponsors of ENDA. This makes me nervous because that means it's a little closer to passing.
We don't want it to pass in its current form because it would enshrine discrimination against people who do things like work for a hospital that has a Catholic remote affiliation, even though most of the employees are not Catholic and it's not a religious...
And it's taking a ton of public money.
Exactly.
To,
if you take public money, you should be bound to abide by the anti-discrimination laws.
Right. So our ideal scenario is that the law does not pass this year and gets rewritten as before it was rewritten to include gender identity and expression, kicking and screaming.
Right.
So let's rewrite it and do it right and then pass it.
Of course, all this would be solved if Pope Francis would just come to the rescue and bless us. I mean, our buddy Mitchell Gold took out a full-page ad signed by Carl Siciliano, who's been on the show, who runs the Ali Forney Center for Homeless LGBT Youth, a plea to Pope Francis on behalf of homeless LGBT youth. And I just have to say, and we're going to talk about it in international news, I mean, the Vatican hasn't turned around on any of these issues. Don't wait for the Pope and don't pin your hopes on this guy who people want to, who sort of, in the popular imagination, who am I to judge, is pro-gay, but he's not.
That's a very standard equation, as you know, looking to one celebrity to solve all your problems instead of doing the grassroots work that's necessary. But what this does is sort of shame him, challenge him to come visit homeless LGBT youth.
Oh, I think after 2,000 years of an all-male hierarchy, keeping women out and all that kind of stuff, they're beyond shame.
I agree.
On the other hand, of course, we had confirmed this week that this piece of papyrus that referred to Jesus' wife is at least an ancient document. And of course, Jesus probably did have a wife. And maybe if the church could have, I mean, if he didn't have a wife, it likely would have been in the Bible. which is the state book of Louisiana.
Well, I'll give you a
the-
little good news from Mississippi.
All right.
Businesses there, after the passage of the heinous Religious Freedom to Discriminate Act, are putting signs in their windows saying, "We don't discriminate." A grassroots movement to promote an ethic of inclusion.
You know, I have some stickers in my closet because we did this in New York, but we never really got the camera. It said, "This establishment does not discriminate."
I'll send them to Mississippi.
I will.
Okay.
But it just says, I think it just says sexual orientation.
I think you should send them to Cleveland, too, where there are some Muslim cab drivers who are upset because Cleveland is hosting the gay games this summer, and so some of the cabs in town, especially from the airports, have signs on the top advertising the gay games. And the Muslim cab drivers, this is not all Muslim cab drivers, but some in Cleveland have spoken up and said, "We don't want to drive cabs that say, 'Come to the gay games' on the top of them."
What about advertisements for gentlemen's clubs? What about advertisements for beer?
Exactly.
Or other things? I think it usually comes down to, they hate us.
Yeah.
And it's not about their religion.
So they're discussing reassigning those cab drivers.
Oh, that's bad. I think they should, well.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of this? There's a publisher of comic books, Oni Press, O-N-I, which publishes the very popular Scott Pilgrim comic. And they have disavowed one of their suppliers, Uline Office Supplies, because it's owned by Richard Uline, who funds anti-marriage campaigns in Illinois, far-right politicians. They've decided they don't want to do business with him anymore.
What do I think about that?
Yeah. It's not unlike the Mozilla thing.
As I said, I don't like go and watch Mel Gibson movies because he's a big anti-Semite. It's very hard to get past that when you look at someone like that.
And we'll get to more of this in international news, but in Dayton, Ohio, at Sinclair Community College, Peter LaBarbera, heinous, hateful guy, was scheduled to speak, and so first of all, he was late for the speech, and the students a couple of hundred students had showed up who were on our side.
Well, he's there for an anti-abortion conference.
No, this is Dayton, Ohio. This is not Canada.
Okay.
This is previous. So he's scheduled to speak. He's late. The students who have come to basically oppose him start a little teach-in, talk thing while they're waiting for him, and people get up and talk and come out and talk about issues, and it's great. And then he finally shows up 45 minutes late. He apologizes. He starts talking about there's no such thing as gay or blah, 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 or, you know, it's a choice, not a...
What would he like us to call our show?
Not an echo.
Yes.
That's a Barry Goldwater reference. So the students get up and walk out. And he is furious. And he says, "Are you effing kidding me?"
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I don't think Jesus likes that. I don't think Jesus' wife likes it any either.
I thought it was a great little stunt. Speaking of stunts, in LaGrange, Georgia, I'm going to hope the control room has this video, at a gas station, the gas station owner decided that he didn't like guys coming into his gas station with their pants around their thighs.
Saggers.
Yeah. Is that what we call it?
I don't know.
So he put up signs saying that only blanks pull their pants down.
We think that the blanked out word is an anti-gay epithet.
Beginning with F. So this has become an issue on the local news, and with any luck, we will show you the local news report on the gas station in LaGrange, Georgia.
New at 11, a controversial sign with a gay slur on it's upsetting a lot of people at a LaGrange convenience store. Channel 2's Rachel Stockman live in Troup County with the reason why the owner says he put that sign up. Rachel?
Justin, an interesting development late tonight. The owner's father came here and took the signs down, but the owner says he will be back in town first thing tomorrow morning. He will put these signs back up because he says he's sick of customers wearing saggy pants.
What I thought, I must be living in Hickville or something like that.
On Thursday night, this sign was up in several spots at the PCA food store in LaGrange. It calls customers a gay slur if they wear baggy pants.
It's discrimination to me. You can't call people
I mean, I couldn't believe they put something like that up.
Some people called us about this sign, and they were offended by it. When I went inside the store, one of the clerks handed me a phone with the store owner who was out of town.
I'm not there to I'm there to serve them. So if they want to come into my business, they better have their pants up.
The owner says his other signs weren't working. Carrie Williams is one of the store's clerks.
They don't bother me.
It doesn't bother you?
Not a bit. And I have a girlfriend, and I am gay.
Some customers are also standing by the owner.
Somebody want to see all that. I don't want to see no grown man with their pants down.
While we were there, we spotted one customer with saggy pants checking out the sign. Did you see the sign?
Oh, yeah, I seen the sign. I seen. You know what I mean? I seen, but I know them good folk now. I know the sign that go to me now.
But Joshua Southern says the sign goes way too far.
There's other ways to deal with it. You could say pull your pants up, nobody wants to see your butt.
And the owner says that this is a matter of free speech. He says he's gotten so much support from some of his customers. He's actually having bumper stickers printed up, and he's going to sell them here at the store. Meanwhile, other customers tell me they're no longer coming to the store. They were so offended. Reporting live in Troup County, Rachel Stockman, Channel 2 Action News Night Beat.
You said bumper stickers, Rachel.
I like the fact that there's a variety of opinion there. And there are people who object to that sign.
Well, it's a confusing story because most of those people are just against the baggy pants.
Yeah.
They're not even really addressing themselves
I don't
to
find
this
them attractive.
slur. No.
But in even more serious gas station news, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, a woman, unfortunately named Anita Hill, went to a local truck stop there at the request of her son and his male lover to discuss issues they were all having with each other. And she ended up pulling out a loaded gun and shooting the lover dead in the back as he was walking away from her.
That's not cricket.
Now, there are questions about the relationship had been going on for several years. There were charges of possibly some abuse in the relationship. That is not a reason to shoot someone dead in the back.
And we have a little update on the Louisiana vote, and that is that the legislature also kept oral sex between heterosexual married couples illegal.
Yeah, good luck with that.
But again, that's an unenforceable, unconstitutional law.
And wasn't it a Louisiana congressman who was just caught kissing his staff member?
A woman, not his wife.
Yes.
And he ran on a family values platform.
Yes, exactly. Well, let's move out of this country to other news.
Well, we told you a lot about India, and we were really horrified that they reinstated these anti-sodomy laws there, the High Court. 2 judges on the High Court, but that's all it took. And there is still some hope for some review. But they ruled this past week, broad rights for transgender people. The government must recognize the chosen gender on official documents, including the third gender if they want. The state is, quote, bound to take some affirmative action for transgender advancement so that the injustice done to them for centuries could be removed.
Yes, they mandated job quotas and education and all sorts of things. But these are 2 other judges on the Supreme Court of India. But what people think is that this, because of some of the reasoning they used, of course, about freedom and equality, that this may set up a situation where the recriminalizing of sodomy can be reconsidered in light of this later ruling because they need to be reconciled because they are contradictory.
And there is a last-ditch appeal pending at the India Supreme Court, but I don't know who hears that.
Well, maybe other judges on the Supreme Court. I don't know how that court is constituted or who would hear this appeal. It was originally going, I think, to a 5-judge panel.
And what is going on in Brunei? Well, they've got a new Sharia law code that calls for death by stoning for sodomy, adultery, sex outside of marriage, and blasphemy. And all I can say to that is, Hasadiga Ibawai. You'll have to see the Book of Mormon to know what that means. The UN High Commission...
I would recommend that the Louisiana congressman not go to Brunei.
or to see the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights condemned the new code. It goes into effect April 22nd. Brunei had a moratorium on the death penalty since 1957, but now it looks like it's gotten religion.
Bad. But good news from Malta, island in the Mediterranean, where they just, what did they just...
legalized civil unions.
Yes,
but with the same rights and obligations as married, and it includes adoption rights.
And 1,000 people showed up in the streets to celebrate quite loudly and happily. In Italy, an interesting ruling. Italy has been one of the least progressive in terms of same-sex marriage rights.
Why is that? It's a laggard.
Well, because the Vatican is in the middle of Italy, perhaps.
Yes, but that's another country.
A couple of Italian men came to New York, got legally married here, went back, sued for recognition of their marriage, and an Italian court agreed with them and has ordered recognition of their marriage legally in Italy. And this may be a breakthrough for same-sex marriage in Italy.
A breakthrough in Ireland, where a 6-year-old female has taken up with a 7-year-old female in Dingle. This is at the Ocean World Aquarium. They are Ireland's first same-sex penguin couple, Missy and Penelope.
That we've noticed.
The penguin keeper says that male-male couples are much more common. These females bow to each other. Missy is fun-loving, confident, and brave. Penelope is a bit shy, but loves swimming, preening, and keeping herself clean and beautiful.
I missed that story. Thank you for including that. In Peru, 3,000 people showed up to march for civil unions. This is a new proposal in Peru. We'll see whether that gets anywhere.
And here's a nice Easter present for you. The UN Population Council met in Cairo this past week, and there was a heated debate on enshrining the right of women to make their own sexual decisions for fear it would condone same-sex relations, which they are less ready to embrace. The conference did recognize a woman's right to reproductive health and when to become pregnant.
Oh,
Imagine
nice
that.
of them.
Well, but the Vatican and many Catholic and Muslim countries blocked any mention of LGBT rights in the final documents. Who am I to judge?
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. This fight has been going on for years in these meetings of the Commission on Population
that they have a
Development.
seat at the table is such an outrage.
It is. But they just ally with all the other right-wing countries in the world and try to block this. Well, this was supposed to be a discussion about women's self-determination sexually and reproductively. And someone who came out of the meeting said, you know, this is ridiculous. It's just gay, gay, gay all the time there. That's all they're talking about in these meetings. It has nothing to do with real self-determination. They're just, everything they say, it all goes back to, we got to stop this gay stuff.
Right. Well, and the roots of the oppression of gay people is in sexism.
Yeah, of course. Homophobia, weapon of sexism, Suzanne Farr.
There you go.
Gender roles, etc. And better meeting at the World Bank this week, where President Jim Yong Kim held the first meeting by the World Bank president of world LGBT leaders and talked to them about how development issues are implicated with LGBT rights. And it was evidently quite a stunning meeting. And these were leaders not from the usual suspect, you know, Western European nations or whatever. These were LGBT leaders from Lebanon, the Philippines, Uganda, Albania, Poland, Guyana, India, Mexico, Brazil, and China. Who also went on to meet with World Bank leaders from around the world. So this was a real big deal.
Well, we've always been able to make faster progress in the corporate world, it seems,
yes,
than in government.
Well, the World Bank is, I guess, an amalgam
The International Olympic Committee is being urged by 19 members of Congress to explicitly protect LGBT people in their non-discrimination policy.
You know, the UN said after the Sochi Olympics, we're going to reach out, we're going to solicit opinions on how we should change the UN Charter or whatever. So now interest groups and now members of Congress, et cetera, are speaking up and saying you should explicitly demand sexual orientation and gender identity and expression non-discrimination in these countries where you are putting the Olympics. And I after our experience with the IOC, not the USOC, the IOC around the Sochi Olympics, it just is looking a little bleak.
Now, I know we deport a lot of people here in this country who come here either seeking asylum or other things, but the United Kingdom is really hot on this. And this week, they went after Anne Nasozi, a Ugandan lesbian who fled in December from Uganda when she escaped an angry mob that included local officials, neighbors, and even some of her own family members. Her asylum application has been rejected, and she's being sent back to Uganda.
Crimea, you know, is now a part of Russia again and adopting Russian ways and Russian laws. And their latest instance of this is banning an LGBT pride march this year. We want to get on board with that. No propaganda of homosexuality to minors nonsense.
Should we put up our stamps in Norway?
Finland.
Oh, is it? Oh, right, of course, it's Finland.
Tom of Finland.
Well, no, why do I think this is?
No, it's Finland.
All right. These are.
See, it says
Finland.
Finland.
Yeah, it is Finland. I don't know why I got this mixed up. Of course, it is Tom of Finland. What is his real name? Tukko Laaksonen. This is the famous homoerotic artist who has,
died 20 years ago.
Yeah, and they've made postage stamps out of his work. We're not showing you the most explicit part of that thing. You can look it up online.
Yes.
Just make sure it's Tom of Finland, not Tom of Norway. It's the song of Norway.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yes, exactly.
But, I wasn't even going to mention this, but I mean, while they're doing that, the Leslie Lohman Museum in New York has an exhibit called Stroke, and it's basically art from gay male pornography. That's the whole exhibit. I mean, it's down there in Soho. Check it out. It's open until May 25th.
Back to Peter LaBarbera. So he got walked out on in Dayton, Ohio, and then he goes to Canada, tries to go to Canada for an anti-abortion conference,
Right.
as you started to say.
Yes.
He first got held up at the border
By the Regina police, taken into custody.
because there is a law prohibiting misinformation and hate speech and hate propaganda.
There's no First Amendment there.
Well, certainly not as we know it.
I mean, they do deem these things to be violations of Canada's Human Rights Code, and they arrested his friend, a guy named Watcott, for similar stuff.
Well, he was standing on the campus, I guess, speaking and refused an order to leave.
I believe in free speech.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And moving on to AIDS
Sure.
news? All right.
Well, there's a promising study on the treatment of people with HIV for hepatitis C. This is out of Gilead Sciences. It is a combination of Sovaldi and Ledipasvir that had a 100% success rate in a small trial.
Well, yeah, and there are drugs that treat hepatitis C, but this is one of the new generation that is going to be easier pills, less side effects, and will not hurt people who are on HIV medication. So that's good news. Big controversy over the AIDS Healthcare Foundation leader, Michael Weinstein.
Oh, yes.
Who gave an interview recently where he was talking about Truvada, the drug that is taken as pre-exposure prophylaxis.
You take it every day, and you're unlikely to get HIV.
Very unlikely. And so people who don't want to use condoms or people who want that level of protection of
if you're
taking
at high
a
risk
pill,
and
if you're having a lot of unprotected sex or just a lot of sex, maybe with multiple partners or whatever, or if you're in a serodiscordant relationship where you want to be protected. Taking this is a good prevention. He says it's just a party drug.
Right.
And there's this whole thing about the stigma of taking this drug.
Well, it's slut shaming, and here's the thing. These are the same things that were said about women who took the pill back when it was developed in the what? The
60s.
In the 60s.
Yeah.
That, oh, you just want to screw around, and this is what you're going to take, and which is insane. You know, and but so, you know, there's a big call for him to resign and step down.
Petition online and everything. I don't know about that, but it's just terrible that he would say that.
Yes.
And it's terrible that people feel that way. There are a lot of issues around Truvada. It can be expensive. It may or may not have side effects for some people.
Got to evaluate that.
You can get other sexually transmitted diseases if you're not using condoms. Everyone should make their own decisions about how they want to protect themselves from all sorts of things. But to engage in this kind of shaming is just horrible.
Okay. In Russia, there's a bill to force people with HIV and other infectious diseases to be fingerprinted and put in a national database. This includes foreign visitors with HIV and other diseases who would also be subject to this. They're saying it's all about crime prevention.
Well, they didn't wait for that in Kissimmee, Florida.
Oh, no.
Bulletin, a young man, 21 years old, was participating in a basketball game at a recreation center in Kissimmee. And in the middle of the second half, they stopped the game and pulled him off the court because they had just found out that he had tested HIV positive the week before.
Outrageous. Didn't you ever hear of Magic Johnson?
Oh, my God. Well, you may remember he quit basketball when he was diagnosed.
But then he came back.
He did, and the NBA adopted universal precautions, which is anytime someone is bleeding, you take them off the court and you dress the wound.
Yes, because you never know who's got what.
Exactly.
Especially with Wilt Chamberlain having 30,000 sex partners or whatever it was.
And then, you know, New York City has this thing where they supply tens of thousands, millions of free condoms around the city.
With a New York City wrapper.
I always thought there should be barrels of them on every street corner to promote their use, but they give them to nonprofits, they give them to restaurants and bars to hand out in hospitals.
Sure.
But it turns out that some of them, barber shops they give them to, some of them are being shipped off to the Dominican Republic and sold for 50 cents a piece.
I hope they're making good use of them. And then
I hope they're good condoms that work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Entertainment news.
Yeah.
Robin Roberts of Good Morning America was in Good Housekeeping and asked why she didn't disclose her 10-year relationship with a woman earlier. And she said, newsflash, some people like their anonymity. This is what's right for me.
Yeah.
But then she later said, love is love, and I'm grateful to have that. Out magazine made her the 10th most powerful out person in the country.
Yeah.
And she's, you know, I don't think she really wants the title.
Some people want their anonymity.
And RuPaul, who is another of the out 50, it's the out 50 most powerful, has been attacking transgender people for policing his language. And 100+ trans women went after writers Calpurnia Adams and Rhea James for what they call hit pieces on young queer trans women.
It's this whole fight over the language on RuPaul's Drag Race. And in fact, Logo, the network that runs it, and Drag Race producers have agreed to drop the phrase, "you've got she-male," which has been part of the show since its inception 6 years ago. And also they agreed to get rid of the one episode this year that was particularly offensive because they ran a little game called Female or She-Male. So that's never going to be seen again. But RuPaul is not happy about this. And so he's been tweeting things like Orwell's Animal Farm. The rebels eventually forgot the purpose of the revolution.
Well, the purpose of the revolution to me is not to insult people.
No, but he would say it's not insulting. And the trans activists say it is insulting. So then the question becomes, who gets to decide what's insulting? The people who say they've been insulted, or people who say they're using the language in a non-insulting way?
We ask
It's
you to
tough.
ponder that.
Yes.
I want to recommend a couple of shows that I saw this week. And how often do I do that?
Rarely.
Closing this Sunday, and I'm sorry it took so long to go to see it because he's a good performer, Dan Hoyle. He's got a solo show called The Real Americans. The last thing he did was about his experience in Nigeria called Tings Day Happen. In this, he decides to get out of his liberal bubble in San Francisco and goes to the South and Midwest and imitates, not satirizes, the people he meets in the red states. He calls the people he meets both welcoming and disturbing. I'd say it's worth the trip, but I wouldn't want to live there.
Is he the modern Anna DeVere Smith?
Yes, very much influenced, I think, by her, and I think he's terrific. Dan Hoyle at the Lynn Redgrave Theater down there at the Culture Project.
I have a movie not to recommend. Noah.
Oh, you saw it? You saw Noah?
I thought it was going to be an entertaining spectacle.
Yeah,
it got reviews that sort of said,
Yeah.
you know, this is
Yeah.
different. So I
Yeah.
went to see it. Absolutely horrible.
Well, Christian Wright doesn't like it either.
It was awful.
But I like The Realistic Joneses. That's a play on Broadway by Will Eno. I'd never seen a play by Will Eno. He's a very big favorite of Edward Albee's. It's the most original play I've seen on Broadway this year. And, you know, with the cast, it's hard to go wrong. Just 4 people, Toni Collette, Michael C. Hall, Tracy Letts, and Marissa Tomei. And they play two neighbors, couples, heterosexual neighbors in a mountain community. But the language of the thing constantly keeps you off balance, and it's kind of hilarious and kind of disturbing.
Is this hilarious or disturbing?
All right.
The GLAAD Awards in L.A.
Yeah.
Debbie Boone. I've changed. I like gay people now.
And I'd like to make, it's just like I'd like to win an election. I'd like to make some money.
Well, maybe, but she's quite enthusiastic on our behalf, and she describes it as an evolution for her.
Tyne Daly in Mothers and Sons says people don't change.
Well, Debbie Boone did. And I would recommend, of course, that you go online and watch Jennifer Lopez's lovely acceptance speech for her award, where she talks about her lesbian aunt, who had a big influence on her, and producing The Fosters, which is a very good show on ABC Family about a lesbian couple and their kids.
Couple of deaths of note. Gregory White Smith, 62, who was Jackson Pollock's biographer, who made reference to the fact that he thought that he was gay himself, Gregory White Smith, and that Pollock may have had homosexual experiences, which really seemed to upset the other Pollock people. I mean, come on, the guy was a falling down drunk and everything else, and you mentioned that he might have had some homosexual experiences. You get all bent out of shape. That's homophobic. Carl Mundy, who was homophobic, he was the general of the Marine Corps, commandant of the Marine Corps, has died at the age of 78. Really fought, don't ask, don't tell. And a guy named Lee Black Childers, a downtown portraitist, hung out with the Andy Warhol crowd and all that kind of stuff, has died at 68.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd say Happy Easter if I believed in that stuff.
It's named after Ishtar.
Oh, okay.
Right? Or actually, you say it Easter. It's a pagan thing.
All right. Okay.
That's where the eggs and the bunnies. The eggs and the bunnies. It's a fertility thing.
That's true.
I hope you all have nice weather and a good time. I'm going up to see my biological family in Rhode Island.
Me too, and we will see you next week. Thank you.